Oh, that's fine, because I want that as well.
Enjoy that?
Two tables
Yes, that's
of
okay.
four?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Do we need a pen? No,
yeah,
you don't.
both of you.
Yeah.
If that's at the bottom.
Say round two.
No, I think we're right.
So that's 5.
Five.
What was the white thing?
Oh, that's.
Intrigue of it.
Shall we start or should
You
we?
start, otherwise we would never get through. Unless you want to stay here till 6 o'clock.
No.
No, right. Start.
Okay, welcome to my presentation. Mine is on word problems. The reason I chose word problems is because I spoke to the teacher, children were studying them at the time, and they were finding it very difficult, especially knowing which operation to choose, and they just found the whole concept quite complicated. So I was quite interested to know where they were finding this problem, and how were they tackling them. Were they tackling it systematically, or was it quite random in what they were trying? So I was trying to just get a feel for it and how I could help them. And any tips I could give them that would actually help funnel them into the correct operations to use. I gave the children some tips using a process called SPICE. So I'll just explain that to you. It's just a way of setting out the problem in logical steps. So it's to try and give them that systematic approach. So sort's the first one, so that's where they sort the numbers. So they read the word problem, and the words could be either in written form or just in numerical form. So it's picking out which numbers they need for that question and circling them up, putting them somewhere separate on a whiteboard. So the next is the problem, which operations required. So a tip that I gave them was have a look at the things. Are they the same or are they different? So for example, if it's about a farmer, how many animals have I got? And there's a list of pigs, sheep, cows. They're all the same things, they're all animals. So if they're the same, we tend to either add or subtract. Whereas if they're different and it's a class, how many children can fit on a bus and children are different, so you're going to divide or multiply. So that's a really quick way to try and at least eliminate two of the options. So after that, then I try and drill them down and look at the vocabulary, just to give them that extra step so they could then pinpoint what the operation was going to be. The next step is to implement. So it's putting that information you've got, so the numbers from your sort, the operation you've decided, you're putting it into a number sentence, so you know how you're going to set your calculation out. I also gave them tips for that as well, so they knew if you were doing a subtraction, the largest number goes first, and just tips like that so they knew how to set it out. The next one is to actually carry it out, so you're actually doing the operation, you're coming up with an answer, and then to check it. So I explained to them a good way to check it is to do the inverse operation. So basically you're working backwards, and if you get back to one of the numbers you started with, then you know you're accurate. If not, you need to go back and check you're working. So it's quite a thorough method that gives them proper steps, but a way of checking they're working as well. And then finally evaluate. I want them to say how hard they found the problem, just so that both for self-reflection and for me as a teacher, just to try and gauge, if they found it difficult, is this an area we need to do a lot more practice on, or is this an area where they all found it relatively simple and we can progress on to more difficult questions. Okay, the resource I made, I'll just give you back your got a couple of copies here. I don't know if you want to say it at the back or... I just tried to make it sound fun by saying it was like a sneaky grid for them to follow, but it was just something where they can actually input the numbers, input what the items are, so it's quite easy for them to use. And then I had a list of the vocabulary, so it's very simple again, where they can just highlight or circle any of the words they saw in the question, just to make it that much easier for them to find the operation. So then there's room for them to actually write out the calculation, and then on the back write out the inverse. Where they can put the final answer and then they can just tick on the back if they found it easy or difficult. So it's just something to give them a bit of structure really. So with problem solving, the big ideas and connections, obviously they need to get to grips with the 4 operations. And then there's obviously the progression. You start with 1 step, build on to 2 step, and then finally multi-step problems. The relationship between the operations is important, so I've sort of sectioned off the addition and the subtraction of partners, the division and multiplication of partners, just so they get to see that you can just flip those 2 round. and get used to those kind of qualities. Understanding the operations and the vocabulary that relate to, so just going over vocabulary, because a lot of the word problem difficulties were from reading the question, not really understanding what it was asking for, not knowing which operation it should be. So it's just getting familiar with different terms linking to which operations. Knowing the order of the information as well, knowing what we need to find out first if it's a two-step problem, or which information isn't actually required as well, because in some word problems they might have lots of different information, but some of it isn't actually relevant to the question. So it's being able to pick out the bits that they actually need. I think it really helps as well, especially the inverse representation, if you can do a lot of visual representation. I find the trio absolutely brilliant. I had children that were really, really struggling with this concept, but as soon as they introduced the trio, it really clicked with them when I was doing array work. And it's just explaining to them that 3 times 4 is 12, 12 by 4 is 3. It just shows how everything's interlinked. And once they get the head around that, you can just miss out a number and get them to put in the numbers. And once they get a feel for that, it seems to make a really big difference to the learning. Okay, so one of the activities I did with the children, I decided to make it fun. I thought, what are children interested? They all seem to quite like The Simpsons, and the characters are quite bright and distinctive. So we had a little question, and the question was, as on the board, there's a fancy dress party with all different characters. You need to see how many full tables of all the characters you can make out of the characters they've got, but you can't have more than one character on the table, so you can't have 2 Barts on the table. So how many full sets can you make? Okay, on your tables, there's an envelope with the characters in. We're going to have a race, see which one can go do it the fastest. So on your marks, get set, go.
Oh, how would I want
Oh my goodness.
so
Right, so it's 1 on each table.
It's one on each, isn't it? So how many?
Right, yeah. Is it the same number of each with that part?
No, it's a mix of numbers.
Oh, I was going to move the table.
So we need to move them to them out and then see how many we've got. I think it's Right, you can't move.
First one to know the answer, put your hand so I know which is the winning table.
It looks like Homer.
7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh no, 11, 12.
12.
Yeah.
There's 12
You know
what?
the answer, put your hand up.
Oh, there's
11.
Okay, we've got a winning table. What was the answer? How many full tables? No.
No, I think it's 11.
Nope.
10.
Oh.
Alright.
Full table.
The answer's 10. So it's quite interesting looking actually. You've both done the same thing. You've grouped the characters, you've not sat them round tables. Which is interesting because that is because we're, our thinking's further on than the children's. When I did this with the children, I did actually give them how many there were of each, but they didn't make that mental connection, which I knew you would, that's why you didn't have the numbers. So they were setting them out into tables, but they were very egocentric. It was almost like their own cards, they got to play swap. So they'd make a table and they'd keep a few of the extra ones. And I had to keep saying to them, put any that's not a full table back in the middle, and let's see if we can make another table. And they really struggled with that because they just wanted to hold on to the cards and no, I need a margin, you give me a margin. So it took a lot longer, there was no system there, they weren't being systematic, they weren't working as a team, it was very much, I want these characters, so that was, very different with the children. I did ask them, is there another way you could do it, knowing the numbers? And none of them made the connection, you could just see which character was the lowest value and that would be the number of tables. And I even explained it to them, and I must have explained it about 3 or 4 times, and they were still really finding that difficult to grasp. So I think the more things you can do like this to try and reinforce it, the better. Because to them, working in the abstract like that, they do really struggle with. Like if they're gifted and talented. So I had a girl who was 4A, and she was very bright, but even then she struggled to make that connection. These are some of the other questions that I gave them, and I gave them a different tool for each question just to try and see if it would help. So for the first one they had multi-link cubes, the time one I gave them a clock, the one with the marbles I gave them a grid with counters on they could manipulate, and the farm one was the spreadsheet that you had there. So it's quite interesting really the reaction I got. So that's just a picture of them. So I did collate, ask them to answer a question at the end of each one if they found it helped them. So we made the question more easy, more difficult or the same, and collated their answers. It's quite interesting really because you found the people that said it was more difficult made no difference. It wasn't because the tools were difficult to use, it's because they were that further on in their thinking and they were quicker in the head. So they just found the tools as a hindrance, like I don't need to do that, that's taken a lot longer because I can just do it in my head. So to me it's very much better for if you introduce a new concept or for groups of children that are struggling, not grasping a concept you've already got. The ones that have got it, they don't want the tools. Yeah, it might be fun to have a play with them, but they're not really gaining anything. If anything, it's adding to frustration. They feel like it's a hindrance. They all seem to like the multi-link cubes the best, and I think it's such a great tool for schools. And I'd wonder, question, is it because they're introduced in nursery, so it's something they're familiar with? It's fun making a tower, they're plain, it's very easy to put two next to each other, they're very easy to manipulate. So I think you can do an awful lot with multi-blocks, the multi-links, and children do really enjoy using them. They did rate that as their favourite for comparisons. They said the most fun was the Simpsons characters, but that's just because it's a novelty really. When I asked them if they'd use the aids again, they all said yeah, like the multi-links. Simpsons cards, yes, they thought that was good. Counters not so much, I think they found that a bit fiddly, whereas obviously the blocks are easy to grip, and the clock they all found useful. So when I asked them if the aids increased the confidence, I got a 50-50 split. 3 said, well, they felt confident anyway, but the other 3 said, yes, it did increase the confidence. So it's certainly not doing any harm. So again, that's just my conclusion really. I think the visual aids, they're very good for children who've not grasped the concept yet, but not so much if they're already there. To make problem solving a bit wider, have more problems that are written down rather than verbal. Start with one-step problems, but then you're going to just use an addition and subtraction, then introduce a few more different operations to build on it and move on to two-step problems. Get children used to highlighting crucial words to help them flag which operation it's going to be to use. The deeper level would be the multi-step problems, mixed operations in one question. A practical activity, group work, like the activity we did with Lawrence where you were a human puzzle, you had to move, there was a gap and you had to slide around and decide how you're going to manipulate yourselves. Using time questions to see if they can represent data correctly. So children really struggle with that when there's a mix of hours and minutes. They don't always think to convert, say, the hours into minutes. So that can really throw them. I've come across a lot of problems with that when I was doing the GPP. And one of my favourites is play spot the mistake. Absolutely brilliant in a plenary. So you'll do the work that they've been doing, you make a mistake, have it up on the board, so there's the question, there's the answer, and the children can have a little chat with each other for a few minutes, and then you say, tell me where the mistake is. And it's a great way, because not only are they, and it's things that I've seen in the lesson the children are doing, so you're not embarrassing anyone or highlighting that person's got it wrong, it's just a class discussion. But it really gets them, one, thinking about it, two, the children that need support actually seeing the more able others supporting them through their explanations. And by children having to explain their thinking and where things have gone wrong, it's even getting more embedded in themselves as well. So I found that a really, really useful tool. So, thank you for your time. Has anybody got any comments or questions you'd like to ask on that?
So you know at the beginning when you had the abbreviations,
Spice.
yeah. So did you come up with that yourself?
No, I've seen it from a teacher.
Right, yeah.
Do you want me to go back to it?
Yeah. I've not seen that before.
It's the only person I know who's used it, and even Alan hadn't seen it before, so I
Yeah.
don't think it's widely used, but it really helps them because you can just go through things step by step, and if you're doing it as a class, you can just say, okay, sort, what we're putting in sort, and do it, break it down, get those answers.
Do you find you have to train the children in doing that?
They pick it up pretty
quite quickly.
Because you'll start off as a class discussion and you'll do examples together. So you'll say, okay, what are my numbers in this question? And then you can get them to circle it or just, and you just do step by step before you move on to the next bit. So it gives you that gradual structure.
Yes.
That would give you help in if you're doing problem solving in terms of success criteria. just use the SPICE process, and then you've got that somewhere else, or they know the system or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, because we even typed it up and had it in the books as well, so we could use it.
Yeah, no, that's good.
And it's a bit like we were talking about yesterday, visualising how to solve a problem,
Yeah, it's
which
just
is a
breaking it
really
down into
helpful
those
thing,
steps.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd recommend that. It really works.
Seen another rucksack I've seen. which is the
Yeah,
same
use
thing,
that
yeah.
e-field.
Yeah.
So it's-
Okay,
Same idea.
thank you very much, Charlotte.
No.
Bring up.
I'll go.
Oh, beat two.
Oh, no. There we go.
Too slow.
You've got to use the whiteboard, so if you can't see, then you get somewhere where you can.
Fancy that recording or something.
So I'm using that.